I've ended up in GTs because GT, I think, went from an amateur status to a really good professional platform, which is incredible to see. And that's why it gave the opportunity to end up there. And it's taken a step above, I would say, well, at least in a certain way, World Touring Cars and all that, it's really got a prestigious platform. But it's crazy to think, because the option was there, but when you're fighting with a currency that's weak against the UK, like we did look at going to the UK and try, it was a considered, but it's one of those things where we just thought we stick to what we know, and that's probably going to give us our best opportunity. And touring cars is what we knew.
No, sure. And what did your dad race in, mate? Because we haven't actually talked about that.
Yeah, so actually, the racing goes back to my granddad, who's from the UK actually, and he moved out to South Africa, and he raced like motocross, just all club racing and motocross and that type of thing. And that's what I think brought the passion to my dad. And then my dad was racing motocross professionally because it was really big in South Africa at the time for different, like couple of the big brands. And then he broke his back and kind of at the point where he made his breakthrough. And then he came back to it and just said, you know what, it's too dangerous. I think at that time they just had my sister actually. And he said he's going to give car racing. Or I don't know. I think it was before that, to be honest. He's going to give car racing a go. And my granddad is really like passionate about like all mechanic side of things. And they, just the two of them, they kind of ventured into car racing, Formula V, Formula GTI, which is basically, it was a F3. It was just basically a Volkswagen F3 back then. They had a one-make class. And then he did one race of Formula 3000. And then ultimately, he stepped in for similar to where you're at, Jake, to be honest. Someone got sick or injured, and then my dad was just there, and they were racing in South Africa, and he got the call up, and it almost presented a great opportunity for him. And then basically he just couldn't get the funding together to race in Europe. And at that time, British like Formula 3000 was an option, but then the championship stopped. So he kind of went back into, that's when he started his touring car thing. And that's when Volkswagen launched this one make championship, which is still existing today, surprisingly, still based off of VW Polo, which is so successful. And he just went into that, and he's such a good people's person, so he was able to make a living out of a amateur series along with his sideline business, but attract way more sponsorship than he needed to. He could work on the cars himself, and I think he's one of the most successful like racing drivers in South Africa to win the least amount of South African titles. I think he finished second about 10 or 15 or 20 times. I don't know, something in his career, like a crazy amount, but only won like 1 or 2 championships. But it's cool, like I always look up to him, and he still kicks my ass. We sometimes drive cars back to back, and he's pretty quick, even though he's 58 years old. So he's really fast and handy, and always willing to call me out when I do shit and stuff like that, which is good to have a good team.
No, yeah, awesome. I mean, go on, Jake. No, I was go on. You
go.
Yeah. I was just going to say, well, something that you touched on earlier that is quite different to a lot of guys that come into or girls even that come into it. You sounded like you had quite a lot of options in terms of what you wanted to do when you were growing up, and when you actually finally had to decide to choose motorsport. I mean, you named what? Golf. What else did you named?
Like radio control, that's not a career, to be honest.
That was it, the radio.
It takes some time, and you can actually, it's funny, like it was crazy because it was like everything that I focused on. But yeah, exactly. I think I don't know what it was. I don't know. I can't pinpoint it. I think when you grow up as a like your parents are so influential in everything you do, and anything you do when they support you kind of becomes natural, and that's what you think. And I can't look back and say why they did certain things, but I can look back and be grateful for it, because I think you get a lot of people, and I think at times in my racing career there was a lot more guys in South Africa who were talented, but I felt they burnt out and then they turned to other things, or whether they've burnt out or ran out of money because of spending too much in the earlier part of their career, or I don't know what it is, but they're not racing anymore. And I kind of feel that when it was time to take things seriously, although I was involved in a lot of sports for a long period of time, I never felt like I burnt out to the point when it was time to take things seriously. I felt that was the time that I had 110% motivation to put into it. And I feel for some kids actually who almost they hammered with just testing. Yeah, you get the guys who are making to F1, and it's incredible to see and hear, but like how, like the way they get burnt out, like there's so many guys chasing that one dream of Formula One, and they might get burnt out, and I feel for them because they never, like, I fell in love with the sport before I took it seriously. I didn't take it seriously, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I took it seriously because I fell in love with it, you know?
What age did you like fully think, what age was that question your dad gave you? What do you want to continue in motorsport? What age was that?
I think it was 2009, 2010. So it's, well, how old was I? 14 then? It was like my last year of karting. 2011 was my last year of karting, but it was actually a year I literally just didn't have a license. I wasn't old enough to race cars, and we were fed up with our governing body who didn't give us a license because of an age thing. Like Calvin, for example, we're the same year. He's a month older than me. He could start 2011, and I couldn't because they put the rule in middle of the year, and he's born in June, I'm in July, so I had to start 2012 for cars. So we're fed up with them. So we're like, we don't want to support their karting, because they're like, yeah, you should stay in karting, try win a championship. And I said, it's going to mean nothing to me. So we had a deal to race Rotax in Europe, but it was before that basically where I said to my dad, he's like, okay, this is the time now. We take this last year of karting 2010 seriously, and then we're taking cars seriously from there onwards, you know. And yeah, that was kind of the point. But that's also the point where I realized, like, that's where I stopped a lot of the other sports that I did. I used to swim. I was horrendous at it. I used to play hockey, not too bad, but just played it because it was a nice team sport. Cricket, also played it. I wasn't going to be a cricketer. I just enjoyed the sport. Golf I was pretty handy on, but I think living on a golf course and growing up on a golf course and playing every day instead of doing my schoolwork was what made that good. But yeah, if there was two sports, it would have been between golf and racing. But at the time, I didn't have the mind for golf, I don't think.
It's quite
somehow
interesting the point
to it. Yeah,
it's quite interesting the point you made about like people getting burnt out, or whether they just spent the money too early or whatever. Because it's when you were saying that, I kind of thought about even my own story in a way, because I started when I was just about to turn 16. And we family, we had money enough, middle class, we had enough to live absolutely comfortably, and we had enough to get into karting in the first place and go into the first steps of car racing. It isn't cheap, but it's nowhere near as expensive as the later levels. But I actually think if I'd started earlier, we would have struggled by the time I came to the age of 16 to jump into cars, and I don't think I would have been able to make it. And I was just sat there pondering about that as you sort of made that point. It's quite an interesting one.
Yeah. And I think at the time also, what made it also a little bit different for me was having an older sister she's 6 years older than me. So she was in the sport for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. She's always been ahead of me, and she is really good. And throughout karting, she was incredibly good and stuff. And she was fortunate enough from a young age to be backed by a lot of like development, like teams and stuff within South Africa, which was paying a lot of motorsport. But then for a period, like my family had to obviously come up with some money and stuff to support. And it was kind of a scene thing. Like she's the racer in the family. Like she's the one who's going to be professional. Yeah. I'm just doing it because I enjoy it. So I took we took kind of a back step on it. We never did anything bad. Like I was very lucky and fortunate enough that every year we rolled out with new materials. So I always used to have a new chassis every year for karting, and I didn't have 10 engines, but I had a practice engine and a race engine and that type of thing. And instead of going testing every weekend, we went maybe once a month, if we weren't racing. And so it's not like I took it unprofessionally. And when it was time to put new tires on, we did. But I can 100% see how we could have spent double, triple the budget to maybe have 1 or 2 more titles on my CV. But I don't know if that would have made a difference, because it wouldn't have got me to F1. No. It definitely wouldn't have got me to F1. And I don't know, because car racing, karting, you learn so much. And I almost feel like one of my strengths these days is being like a good racer. I feel like it was kind of help trying to like always have to fight when it came to kind of being a bit unprepared, you know. I never won
Yeah.
titles, but I don't look at it any bad way. And I'm actually like, I think I would be the person I am today based on, I would be a totally different person. I might not be in motorsport. I could be somewhere else, you know, but I'm here today because of what's happened. And I think I don't blame I can't say to my parents, you know, I could be a this or that. And I think like, I'm just grateful for the opportunity that they gave me. And I think we did everything, at least what we thought was best, to our best ability, you know.